Welcome to Decode Your Burnout, the podcast where we crack the code on burnout based on three primary factors: your programming, environment, and personality. We also feature experts who debunk the myths about what it takes to be successful in their industry and spin those tips to fit the workplace so you can optimize the way you work. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon Grossman, a psychologist turned coach, author, and burnout expert. If you're burned out and want to go from exhausted to extraordinary, book a free breakthrough session with me by going to bookachatwithsharon.com. And if you want to see how you're doing and what to focus on next, download the Burnout Checklist. You'll find the link in the show notes or go to bit.ly/checkyourburnout. Now let's get started.
For me, I've been able to have the self-awareness in my life, but I've needed to have it. So hypervigilance, yay. But the self-awareness in my life to realize when my body kind of gives me a warning sign, and I listen to the warning sign. And so, I like the warning sign, but I listen to the warning sign. And this is a really long story. Let me know if you want me to end. But with that being said, I listen to the warning sign and I take action accordingly. But with each of them, they've all helped to structure and repivot me. And so I say that to say, the reason I brought this story later in the year is to say, okay, yes, in high school, I learned some stuff and it was great, but you're never going to fully solve the problem, right? And so it never sort of just automatically goes away. Like there's not necessarily a quick fix, right? It's a journey, it's a habit, and sometimes things will come in your life that can you forget all that you've learned, forget all that you've taught yourself, forget all that you've, decided within yourself and your intention. And things sort of come back again, right? And so then you kind of have a new hurdle, but still using the same techniques to get you over that hurdle. And so that's essentially what happened to me. And then it's entrepreneurship. Let me tell you what happened in entrepreneurship. Actually, maybe. Do you want me to? Should I continue? Should I not?
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So in entrepreneurship, what had happened was that I had been, so entrepreneurship for me. So when I entered entrepreneurship, and I'll just preface to say, for me, entrepreneurship and business ownership was a new thing. So I didn't grow up with a family who owned businesses, etc. So I read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I read that book, and that was my sort of aha, oh my gosh, I'm in the wrong quadrant. And it was sort of my awakening of there's a small bit, America runs on business. Who knew? I did it. Or just the idea of, for me, I was oh my God, regular people own laundromats this whole time. I thought it was some, et cetera. That book was sort of my awakening, right, to that sort of world and life. And so it wasn't until a couple months later that I then woke up on a Sunday morning. I was still in California at the time. Woke up on a Sunday morning, woke up in a trance because I grabbed my laptop, started typing away furiously, looked up at my laptop, looked around my room, looked back at my laptop. I was oh my God, I have a business now. Who knew? So that was pretty much how my business started. But with that being said, entrepreneurship was still sort of a new sort of world to me in terms of seeing myself as an entrepreneur, seeing the possibility of me being a business owner or CEO. Yes, it's something to get around. With that being said, for me, because it was a new thing, I said, okay, I'm starting from zero. I must not know much about this space, so to speak, because I'm new to it, right? And so I need to sort of learn new things in order to live in the world of entrepreneurship and business. That's what I said to myself. And you can probably see where it's going. But ultimately what ended up happening was I ended up in this space where there was a 5-month time frame, where I lived in shiny object syndrome. And, and I love learning. And so that part of shiny object syndrome is really fun when you're just learning. Yay. Right. You're hopping around from one thing to the next and you're just learning as you go. Yay, learning. But you're not growing, but you're learning, but your business is not growing. But ultimately speaking, then another phase came to my business where I was okay, let me launch this 9-day event. So I decided to do this 5 to 9 day, ended up being 9-day thing. But a 9-day event for, people. So I ended up getting 180 signups. So this free thing that I did. And I was still doing my corporate job at the time too. So I kept my day job while doing my business. So I did that intentionally because not all of us have the privilege of just quitting. So with that being said, I kept my day job while doing my business. And so I was doing that. So I decided to do this whole 9-day challenge thing, this new launch, right? A business is just a series of launches. So I decided to do this new launch for the community. And I started this Facebook community and got 108 people to sign up for it in less than 3.5 weeks. It was great. At the same time, there's also a funeral in the family. It was a whole thing. But with that being said, you're probably how did I manage to get that all done? talk about that in the next 3 tips, right? I think so. But with that being said, I then did the first time, didn't get any sales, but I was like, hey, it was the first time. That's all good. Let me do it a second time, right? So 2 months later, I did the second time. Only got 40 signups because I really did not market. So that was all on me. Totally fine. I get that. It's cool. But I managed to inspire and motivate people to then take the next step in their journey, right? So I got 2 new clients from there. So I said, okay, I must be getting better at this. Yes, indeed, I am. So here's what I'm going to do. The third time I do this, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put in 3 times the amount of time, money, and energy. So that way, obviously, I'm going to get 3 times the amount of results. Duh, right? Wrong. So what ended up happening instead was that I ended up getting, still people loved the content. They were inspired, they were informed, they were great. And actually ended up having a team of people at the time too. I then got a team of people for this third round and trained them on how to ensure that we provided the best customer service for the people participating in this 9-day event. And I was just like, okay, and I rented out a space in Massachusetts, and I'm in Massachusetts in this wintertime. I ended up getting some frostbite. It was a whole situation, but I was like, that's okay. I'm putting in the time, money, energy, and it's going to work out. And then it didn't work out. So the 9-day event was great. People loved it. But ultimately, we didn't end up getting people to the next step. And then we also, at the same time, ended up getting some, people ended up ghosting us. Then they came back. So it's they loved it. That's how I knew that they loved it. Because then I reached out back to them after everything was done. And they still wanted to chat. And I was like, oh, okay. So what happened? But point being, aside from that, what ended up happening was 8 nights of tears. And so during the daytime, I still had my day job at the time. And I had my team of people who were aside from the business, I had the day job and I had the business. And so I was keeping my brave face, during the day. But then at nighttime, 8 nights of tears. And so I say 8 nights of tears because it was 8 nights of tears. And I never experienced that before. I thought those things just happen in movies when people cry themselves to sleep. That was literally me for 8 nights in a row, cried myself to sleep. It was until the 8th night where I ended up deciding I took a step back and I said, okay, how did this happen? How did we get here? Well, one, because I had the false pretense. Now I realized at the time that it was a false pretense, essentially, because I had the false pretense that, more money, more time, more energy means more results when it comes to business. And I say that to say that's a lot of things that people are facing, right? And it's not only, I don't know if there are mainly business owners watching or listening, or business owners or professionals who are just doing day job in life and balancing all the hats. But ultimately what's happening is that there's a underlying myth / understanding / perception that you may have where you're thinking, okay, more time and energy more will lead to more results, right? And if I just put in more effort, I'm going to get the reward at some point in time. It's all just going to work out, right? And so in business ownership, what it looks like is, I want to reach some vision of mine. And, it's going to happen sometime, someday in the future. And so, yeah, sure, my family hates me. My spouse hates me. My kids are where am I? My friends are confused as to my existence. But that's okay because someday in the future, I will reach some success level and they will forgive me, right? And what people end up missing is that they'll forgive you if perhaps they're still around, but they may not still be around. And then things like that, it's will you forgive yourself, right? Will you forgive yourself for going through that experience as well too? And so what I encourage my clients to do instead is to hustle and breathe. And so it's, yes, hustle, get things done, but also take care of yourself in the process. 3 main tips the way that we do that. Well, actually, I don't know if you want to go into that.
Well, before we go into the tips, first of all, thank you so much for sharing. Clearly, you've had quite a journey up until now, all the way from high school until present day, and having gone through corporate work and entrepreneurship. There's a lot in your story that I think is important to highlight before we jump forward. So you mentioned that burnout started for you all the way back in high school. And you also then said that you've had all these experiences and you were kind of in this pattern that they built on each other. Can you speak to that of how sometimes burnout can happen really quickly or you kind of feeling it, and other times it's a buildup process?
Yes, I would say it's one of those things where burnout in general tends to be a buildup process. And so what happens a lot is that if there's someone listening who has burned out, if you were to take a moment to take a step back, you didn't just wake up and burn out. It wasn't just oh, and now I fainted. Right, there was a buildup process to when that fainting occurred or to when you ended up in the hospital, right? There was a buildup process. There were moments And it may have been building up for the past month. Maybe there was a hectic month at work. Maybe it was the past 6 months. Maybe it was the past 5 years of your business, whatever it may be. But it's always been something that, and sometimes it takes its way in terms of like health things is usually like, because it's stress. Ultimately, they say, like stress is good because it helps release cortisol. It helps you take action, they say, right? There's that camp of people.
Sure.
But there is such a thing as too much stress. Okay.